Hey all, Ron here from Military Images Magazine with a new episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail. You know, the veteran pictured here, John Henry Haynie, spent his entire Civil War service from 1861 to 1864 as a corporal in the ranks of Company D of the 19th Illinois Infantry. During his 3 years in uniform, Haney distinguished himself at the Battle of Stones River, where he suffered a wound and fell into enemy hands, the Battle of Chickamauga, Missionary Ridge, Resaca, and uncounted skirmishes and other actions with his comrades. He survived it all, and after the war, he became involved in veterans affairs, especially with the Grand Army of the Republic, that massive, huge organization with posts across the country. He, in fact, is pictured here in the classic GAR uniform. You can see his hat, his broad-brimmed hat with the initials GAR in the center with a wreath around it. You can see his uniform coat with the brass buttons. His Grand Army of the Republic medal is slightly elevated compared to the two flanking them. Those flanking ribbons and medals are probably from encampments. In other words, annual events that the veterans attended. He's telling us that he's proud of his service and proud to wear the GAR uniform. Haney, in fact, went on to serve as commander of his post, and in that role made many contributions to the health and welfare of his comrades and doing his part to keep the history of the Civil War relevant to future generations. All the kids that were in town to see the old men marching in parades every year, that was part of his job. Haney, in fact, also wrote a preface for the Regimental history, the 19th Illinois Infantry. That book details all the camps and campaigns in which the regiment participated. The 19th Illinois Infantry's regimental history and other books, they're highly valued today for the accounts of those who served and the esprit de corps that these citizen soldiers embraced when they stood up to serve and fight in the army. Tragically, Haney died just before the book appeared in print. It was in 1912. He never saw a copy. Now, I'm always interested in prefaces because it gives me a sense of how the veterans put the war into context, how they thought about themselves, how they thought about their place in history, and what they wanted to leave behind, how they wanted to frame it so those Americans and others across the world who study this conflict to get a sense of where they were coming from. And I dare say that Haney's is unique in that he framed the Civil War as a massive and tragic conflict set on a continent that has only known conflict for many, many centuries. The best way to share with you the overall framing is to just read some selected passages. It will help you appreciate how Haney defined our land in historic terms and what he had to say about that. So let's begin. He starts, "Impossible as it may seem, our great country is really a land of many wars. For although as a great nation, we are one of the youngest on the globe, the valleys and the hills, the plains and the mountains we call America, and are our own, are as old as the oldest countries of the ancient world. Indeed, some parts of our vast territory are thick piled with ruined towns and habitations which are believed to be of greater antiquity than the famed desolations of Greece and Egypt. This continent has probably been a fighting field for more than 25 centuries, and for that length of time, man has struggled here to defend himself or to take possession. On this continent, and in long past ages, men by swarms, naked or in hairy skins of animals they brought down with flint-tipped spear or arrow, roamed in search of their enemies. And No sooner had these hordes become tribal organizations than the struggle for possession leapt again to the fore, and wars were everywhere. Centuries later, in the dim, majestic forest, hoar with time, but silent now, and filled with the brooding pathos of forgotten things, the Amerinds, that is to say, the human beings wrongly called Indians, took and held this continent. In many a region of our now beloved land, uncounted warriors once streamed as ruthless forces, advancing and retreating, burning and destroying. Down many a flowing stream or on many a pond or lake, their war canoes came or went, leaving billows of blood at the bend or these shallows of river where, fighting hand to hand, savages battled to retain or gain. After innumerable wars between the first inhabitants came the many wars between red men and white men. The Anglo-Saxon had arrived at Jamestown and Plymouth, and he hastened to take possession by force of arms. A thirst for empire came with the newcomers, and the wars they brought on continued for more than 200 years. Here, there, and yonder, the red men and the whites fought freely, fiercely, the pomp and pride of paint and plumes and bows and arrows against the stern ruggedness of those bearing rifles which spoke death. They fought for centuries, one for increased territory, unbounded power, and civilization, the other for his home and native hunting grounds. After that, indeed, in the midst thereof, the revolution occurred, and from Lexington and Bunker Hill into the South and Middle West ran not only war's alarms, but many a battle between Anglo-Saxons, one side fighting for freedom and independence, the other side to crush and still control. That war ended. Another broke forth within 30 years or so, and again between kindred people. Once more our land heard the heavy tread of an armed invading force, but the Battle of New Orleans was the last of the War of 1812. And since then, no foreign foe has ventured to set foot upon the soil of this republic. And then, less than half a century after our last war with England, the most terrible strife this continent has ever known or ever will know, God willing, shook the heart and rent the soul of the United States of America. Its valleys and hills, its fields and woods, its brooks and mighty rivers swarmed with armed men, and the smoke and groans of deadly conflict went up from thousands of battlegrounds. Those warriors were, in the main, not only white, but of the same race and nation. It was officially called the War of the Rebellion, and later the Civil War. It was really a fratricidal war of brother against brother, father against son, friend against friend, the same people of the same republic and of the same churches at each other's throats in deadly earnestness. The hills and the mountains, the lakes and the streams, the towns and the cities, the fields and the meadows beheld two enormous armies, one in blue, the other in gray, most of their soldiers sons of a common ancestry, having the same scorn of danger, the same heroic determination in battle array, but alas, one side attempting to destroy, while the other side was loyally supporting the national union. Then, men of the same race and kin strove and dared, blundered and achieved, fought out their utmost reserves of strength until 250,000 of them lay in ghastly windrows on the same blood-darkened earth where stag and lynx, wolf and bear, brown men and red men have torn one another through an immensity of centuries. It is with that war and some of its battles, that is to say, with the few hundred of its loyal soldiers who participated in it, that we have to do in these pages. He, of course, is bringing it down. Haney's bringing it down to the regimental level. He says one more item of note. Mankind will never forget Abraham or Moses or Leonidas or Cincinnatus or Pericles or Paul or Richelieu or Cromwell or Washington or Gladstone. Nor will mankind ever forget the hero martyr whom Our war added to that grand company of immortals. Lincoln had the faith of Abraham, the leadership of Moses, the courage of Leonidas, the simplicity of Cincinnatus, the statesmanship of Pericles, the intellectual force of St. Paul, the political wisdom of Richelieu, the integrity and patriotism of Washington, and the eloquence of Gladstone. Lincoln, how beautiful and good he stands to our mind and imagination, a man to whom was given so much of earth, so much of heaven. With all the civilized nations of the world today, there is one lasting memory of the Civil War in America, and it is the admiring remembrance of Abraham Lincoln, whom our own dear state of Illinois gave to the Union and to the whole country. So there you have the preface of John Henry Haynie of the 19th Illinois Infantry, the words he wrote to frame the role of his regiment in the American Civil War on the continent of North America, the biggest conflict fought in his mind in 25 centuries. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode of Life on the Civil War Research Trail.